She was so innocent in her outlook on people. She really could not judge a bad person.
She finally had what she'd always dreamed of. Her own flat, her independence, and friends who made her feel like she belonged. But one quiet summer night, that feeling of safety began to slip away. What started as an ordinary visit would soon reveal just how wrong she was about the people she trusted most. To understand how a night among friends could end so differently from how it began, we need to rewind to that quiet August evening in 2010, when Gemma opened her door to the people she trusted most. Gemma entered the world on September 13th, 1982, to her mother, Sue Prince. She was one of 3 siblings, growing up alongside her sister Nikki Reed, and another sibling in a warm and lively home. From the moment she arrived, Gemma brought joy with her. Her mother recalls her as affectionate, bright, and full of life. Sue often described her as a child who lived for closeness, always reaching for hugs and radiating kindness. Gemma's gentle nature left an impression on everyone who knew her. She was the kind of person who couldn't bear to see anyone upset, and carried a heart that seemed to always look for the good in others. But even in her earliest years, Sue noticed that Gemma's development followed a different rhythm than her siblings. There were things that didn't quite add up, small details that suggested Gemma was experiencing the world in her own unique way. Concerned, her family sought answers through a series of medical evaluations and developmental tests. Each time, the results came back uncertain. It was the 1980s, and understanding around developmental differences, especially among girls, was limited. What might be recognized today as a learning or developmental condition often went unnoticed or misunderstood back then. Nikki, Gemma's older sister, later reflected on how challenging those years were. She remembered watching Gemma struggle through situations that other children seemed to manage easily, all while wondering why no one stepped in to help. "It's hard to understand how she kept getting overlooked," Nikki would say years later. It was obvious she needed more support. But somehow she stayed in the same classes, expected to do what everyone else could. Despite these struggles, Gemma faced each day with quiet determination, never losing her warmth or the loving spirit that made her so deeply cherished by her family. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps me make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. At just 14, Gemma began attending a school designed for students who learned differently. It was a step meant to help her. But without a clear diagnosis, her mother, Sue, was left navigating a confusing system on her own. Records later showed that social services had interacted with Gemma 29 times between the ages of 13 and 19. Despite so many touchpoints, few meaningful answers came. More tests were done, more questions asked. Yet officials concluded that Gemma's challenges weren't significant enough to qualify her for consistent help. It's a space many families know too well, where help is always promised, but somehow never arrives. Many families find themselves in this in-between space, where needs are acknowledged but rarely met. That's exactly where Gemma fell, a young woman trying to grow into independence while the systems around her quietly failed to catch. Her sister Nikki would later reflect on how exhausting it had been to keep asking for help that never truly arrived. We'd gone to everyone, teachers, doctors, social workers, hoping someone would step in, she said. But she never seemed to fit into any of their categories. One professional would say she might have one condition. Another would disagree. In the end, nobody really helped her. The frustration was deepened by the knowledge that Gemma's difficulties were visible, yet consistently minimized. Even so, Gemma never stopped hoping for a better life. In 2008, she wrote a heartfelt letter to the local authorities. In it, she expressed her wish to work, to stand on her own 2 feet, and to have guidance when she needed it. "I want my independence," she wrote. I just need someone to help me when I ask." It was a simple request for dignity, purpose, and the chance to be seen as capable. By 27, Gemma was living alone in a small council flat in Rugby, Warwickshire. The building was old and grey, and despite her best efforts, she struggled to maintain a safe, comfortable space. Without the resources she had long been denied, daily life became harder than it should have been. Her home showed what happens when support never comes. More than anything, Gemma wanted connection. She had a gentle nature and an open heart, qualities that drew people in easily. But kindness can sometimes be misunderstood, and trust, when placed in the wrong hands, can lead to heartbreak. For Gemma, that trust would soon be tested in ways no one could have imagined. On the afternoon of August 7th, 2010, family friend Fran Cutt happened to see Gemma outside a small garage near her home in Rugby. With her were two young adults, Daniel and Chantel, people Gemma truly believed cared for her. When Fran asked what their plans were, Gemma said they were going to Coventry together. It was only after a few more questions that Fran realized something wasn't right. The pair had convinced Gemma to take things on their behalf, and she seemed unaware that what they were asking of her was wrong. In her mind, she was helping her friends. As Fran listened, a deeper concern began to surface. Gemma had been persuaded by 19-year-old Daniel Newstead and 21-year-old Chantel Booth to let them use her home to store harmful substances, something that placed her safety and well-being in jeopardy. In legal terms, it's called cuckooing, when someone takes over another person's home to use it for their own advantage, often targeting those who are trusting or alone. What should have been Gemma's safe place had quietly turned into something else, a space where her kindness was being taken advantage of. When Fran brought it up, Gemma responded with quiet certainty. "They're just staying with me," she said, her tone gentle and sincere. She didn't recognize the warning signs that others might have seen. To her, they weren't a problem. They were friends. That same trusting nature, the part of her that always wanted to see the good in people, was quietly leading her into danger she couldn't yet understand. Later that evening, Gemma went out with Daniel, Chantel, and several others: 17-year-old Joe Bear, 18-year-old Jessica Leonis, and 19-year-old Duncan Edwards. The group stopped at a nearby pub, where Gemma joked with the bouncer that someone in their party was only 16. The comment led to the group being asked to leave, which upset Chantel. Tension quickly turned toward Gemma. The situation escalated, and bystanders would later recall that she looked uneasy and unsure of how to respond. CCTV footage from that night would later become key evidence, showing just how isolated she was, even while surrounded by people she called friends.
After enduring unfair treatment from the group the night before, Gemma returned to Chantel's flat the next morning to collect some of her belongings. It was meant to be a simple visit, nothing more than a quick stop before moving on with her day. But in the hours that followed, Gemma found herself in a situation that would change everything. What unfolded behind closed doors was later described by investigators as deeply unjust and profoundly heartbreaking. Her sister Nikki would go on to say that Gemma's trust had been misplaced in people who did not deserve it. She often spoke about how much Gemma had wanted to believe she was safe, surrounded by those she still called friends. That belief, Nikki said, was part of who Gemma was: kind, forgiving, and hopeful, even when she had every reason not to be. Later that evening, all five assured Gemma they were taking her home. Believing their words, Gemma followed, trusting that the tension of the past day was finally over. It's believed she held on to that promise with quiet relief, thinking she was just moments away from safety. Nikki later reflected that her sister probably felt a sense of comfort in those final moments, believing she was almost home, just a few steps from warmth, from peace, from everything familiar. But Gemma never made it back. Instead, she was led away from the safety she thought awaited her, down a quiet path where help would never come. The events that followed led to a devastating loss that shook the town of Rugby and left a permanent ache in the hearts of those who loved her. When the truth came out, It revealed a series of choices so heartless that the entire community struggled to make sense of them. Investigators described the case as one of the most haunting they had ever faced, not for what they discovered, but for the trust that was broken and the life that was taken far too soon. The following morning, a passerby made a heartbreaking discovery along a quiet path near Rugby. Word of what had happened spread quickly, leaving the community in quiet disbelief. Gemma never got the chance to live the full life she deserved, and the sorrow that followed reached far beyond the town she called home. Not long after, one of those connected to the group posted a cryptic message online, an attempt, investigators believed, to shift attention away from herself. The post mentioned the location and questioned the rumors already circulating. To many, it came across as cold and calculating, deepening the outrage felt by those who cared for Gemma. When Gemma's mother, Sue, returned to the place where her daughter's story came to an end, she described a silence that words could hardly fill. Standing there, she told reporters that she could not understand how anyone could cause harm to someone so trusting and vulnerable. Sue spoke gently about her daughter's forgiving nature, saying that even after everything, Gemma might have still offered compassion to those who wronged her. Her sister Nikki shared a similar sentiment. She often reflected on how uncertain and lost Gemma must have felt in those final hours, unable to make sense of what was happening around her. Nikki's words carried both love and heartbreak, an unanswerable question of why that still echoes today. Local authorities soon identified and detained those responsible. Each faced serious legal consequences for their involvement in the tragedy. Nikki later recalled the pain of sitting in court as the events were recounted, describing it as one of the hardest moments of her life. But even in the midst of that heartbreak, she and her family found strength in knowing that justice, however incomplete, had begun to take shape. In court, Gemma's mother, Sue Prince, shared a deeply personal statement, one that captured both the depth of her loss and the disbelief that still surrounded it. She spoke not only as a grieving parent, but as someone trying to understand how so many could stand by and let such harm unfold. Sue reflected on the unimaginable pain of losing her daughter and the haunting reality that several people were involved, yet no one stepped in to stop it. Even with time, she said, it was impossible to comprehend how compassion could fade so completely in a group so young. Her words were not filled with anger, but with quiet sorrow. She spoke of the love she carried for Gemma, of years spent fighting to make sure her daughter received the care and understanding she needed. That love, she said, had never wavered, and never would. In the end, Sue shared that she didn't hold hatred in her heart for those responsible. What she felt instead was something more complex, perhaps pity, or a deep sadness for the paths that led them there. So many wasted chances, she said softly, and so many lives forever changed. Sue's words stayed with everyone who heard them, an echo of love, grief, and unanswered questions. But as the case reached the courtroom, that same sense of sorrow was joined by something else: accountability. In her closing remarks, Lady Justice Rafferty did not hold back in expressing her dismay over what had taken place. She described the group's actions as deeply troubling and marked by a level of indifference that defied understanding. Her words carried the full weight of the court's outrage, calling the incident a story of profound that left her almost at a loss for language.
During the proceedings, reports noted that the judge found it difficult to watch portions of the evidence presented in court. Footage showing Gemma in her final moments of trust toward those she considered friends. The judge spoke of a young woman who followed them without hesitation, unaware of the fate that awaited her, and of how her trust had been so deeply betrayed. Judge Rafferty detailed how Gemma had been placed in a situation where she was left isolated and unable to reach help. What followed, she said, revealed a complete disregard for compassion and humanity. Her words painted a picture not of but of cruelty born from detachment, a moment in which empathy seemed to vanish entirely. The judge's sentencing reflected the seriousness of the case. Daniel Newstead, Chantel Booth, and Joe Burr were each convicted of taking part in actions that led to Gemma's tragic loss of life. They were ordered to serve lengthy prison terms, ranging from 16 to 21 years before being considered for release. Jessica Linus and Duncan Edwards, found guilty on lesser charges, were each given sentences of 13 and 15 years. Before concluding, Judge Rafferty addressed Chantel directly, reflecting on the troubling pattern that had shaped her relationship with Gemma. Over the years, she said, Chantel had taken advantage of Gemma's kindness and loyalty, offering friendship only when it was convenient. The judge spoke of choices that reflected deep insensitivity and emotional distance, decisions that ultimately led to heartbreak for everyone involved. It was, she noted, a tragic crossroads between two young lives that might have unfolded so differently. Outside the courthouse, Gemma's family expressed quiet relief that justice had finally been served. Her mother, Sue, said the outcome brought a measure of peace after so many painful months of uncertainty. Though no decision could ever fill the space her daughter left behind, she hoped the time ahead would allow those responsible to reflect on the choices that changed so many lives. The family also took a moment to thank the community for the unwavering support they had shown throughout the ordeal. Detective Chief Inspector James Essex spoke afterward, commending his team for their dedication and compassion during one of the most challenging investigations of their careers. He described Gemma as a gentle and trusting young woman whose kindness was often taken for granted. He said the case reminded everyone involved why protecting the most vulnerable must remain at the heart of their work. In the months following the trial, an independent panel launched a comprehensive review to understand the deeper issues that had shaped Gemma's life. Their findings revealed a long history of missed opportunities and unfulfilled promises. Between her teenage years and early adulthood, Gemma had reached out to services nearly 30 times, hoping for guidance and stability. Yet many of those connections faded before real help could take root. 𝐂𝐫𝐜𝐿, who led the review, noted that while no one could say with certainty that Gemma's passing could have been prevented, consistent and compassionate support might have changed her path. She explained that with stronger networks in place, Gemma could have been better protected and surrounded by people who genuinely cared for her well-being. Local counselor Les Caborn later acknowledged that Gemma's case served as a wake-up call for the entire authority. He admitted that while the tragedy may not have been entirely foreseeable, it exposed serious weaknesses in how support systems communicate and respond. He emphasized that steps have since been taken to strengthen those networks, ensuring that no one else slips through the gaps in the same way. Despite these efforts, similar cases have continued to surface across the country. A government report released several years later revealed a troubling rise in hate-related incidents. Nearly a decade after Gemma's passing, the numbers had more than tripled, a quiet reminder that the work of building safety, dignity, and inclusion is far from over. A BBC Three documentary later revisited Gemma's story, offering a deeper look at her life and the many questions that remained after her passing. The film, Gemma, My Story, can be found in full on YouTube, and the link is included below in the description section. Gemma's sister, Nikki, also shared her reflections after watching the documentary. In a quiet and heartfelt video on her own channel, she spoke about how difficult it was to relive those memories, but also how grateful she felt that Gemma's story was being told with care. For her, it wasn't just about revisiting the pain. It was about reminding people who Gemma truly was, and why her life still matters. My take on this case is that if we truly want to prevent stories like Gemma's from ever happening again, we have to start by rethinking what protection really means. Safety isn't just about emergency response. It's about presence, consistency, and connection. Too often, systems step in only when the damage is done, rather than when the first signs of isolation appear. People like Gemma don't just need services. They need to be seen, understood, and supported in ways that recognize both their independence and their vulnerabilities. Change has to begin on multiple levels. Communities must learn to recognize when someone is being drawn into unhealthy relationships or unsafe environments, and feel responsible, not just sympathetic enough to intervene. Agencies must communicate more clearly, share information faster, and treat every concern as potentially life-altering rather than routine. Compassion must be institutional, not optional. If society is to learn anything from Gemma's story, it's that care cannot wait for crisis. Prevention means creating a safety net woven with empathy, one where every, from neighbors to caseworkers, holds firm. Her story reminds us that humanity's strength is measured not by how we punish wrongdoing, but by how we protect those who can't always protect themselves. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe and share it, not for numbers, but to keep conversations like this alive. Awareness is the first step toward protection, and your support helps make that possible.